Hello everyone and welcome. Today we are going to discuss vendor master management from an auditor's perspective. Whether you are a junior auditor, an experienced internal auditor, or a head of audit, or a chief audit executive, or someone who might be working in the business units like a business end user, someone working in accounts payable or procurement department, this session will help you understand one of the most critical but often overlooked areas in every organization. By the end of this session, you will know not only what to audit, but also why these risks matter and how to identify them in SAP through practical demonstrations. As you know, organizations across the world face substantial losses due to frauds or negligence, and mostly that's in the procurement area. Every fraudulent payment, or a duplicate payment, or unauthorized payments, all these are the result and byproduct of weak vendor master controls. So, in this course, I will show you how experienced auditors go beyond the basics to identify hidden risks and evaluate key controls that exist, might be manually or within your ERP environment, such as SAP or Oracle. But in this video, we will be focusing solely on the SAP demonstrations. So I will help you extract the right information and detect control gaps that many auditors overlook. So before we start, I would like you to uh, brief you about myself. My name is Abdullah, and I have more than 11 years of experience in internal audit and risk advisory across multiple industries. As you can see, currently I'm working in Kawa, which is Qatar's public transport company. I also worked in Toyota Qatar previously, and Honda Pakistan Packages Group, which is one of the largest conglomerate groups in Pakistan, and EUI. So throughout my career, I have led operational compliance, financial procurement audits, where my main focus was always going deeper into the operations, understanding the business processes, and strengthening the controls through leveraging data analytics to deliver a deeper audit insights. So, everything I will share today comes from practical audit experience and lessons learned in real organizations. So, let's get started. What is a vendor master? That's a simple, basic question, but most of the users and auditors they don't know the real understanding about the vendor master because some of you might be just starting the career as junior auditor. So, a vendor master is like central repository that stores all information about a supplier before the organization can purchase goods or services or make payments. So it typically contains information such as vendor name, address, bank details, tax information, or Incoterms, payment terms, and other key information. So if I have to relate it with something which could be practical, is when you could save a contact on your phone, which we all of us do. So each contact when we save it with a name, right? And a phone number, email address, or sometimes a company information about our colleague, or it could be our friend, or our might be someone we know outside our organization. So we save all these details in on our phone, and that's how the contact master exists. The same concept exists for a vendor master. So vendor master is created in the similar fashion, but in the organizational environment, it's done by mostly by the procurement department. So they collect all this information before they take the vendor on board. So if the information saved in your phone is incorrect, assumingly, you will contact the wrong person, right? And that's the similar case when the vendor master contains inaccurate or incorrect or fraudulent information. The organization may issue purchase orders to the wrong supplier or make payments to an incorrect bank account. This is why vendor master is so important. Why is it an important area? Well, vendor master is not just another database. It is the foundation of every procurement and payment transaction. Every purchase order, goods receipt, invoice, and supplier payment depends on the integrity of the vendor master data. So, weak controls in this area can result in duplicate vendors, duplicate payments due to unauthorized or fictitious vendors, fraud possibilities if excessive or unauthorized transactions have been granted to the employees, which result in modification of bank details or creation of uh, vendors which do not exist actually. And it also sometimes creates compliance violations if text code or other details are not accurately maintained. And lastly, it may also result in operational lapses and inefficiencies due to overall delay in purchase decisions because approaching inactive, dormant, and irrelevant vendors due to outdated vendor master can result in increased procurement cycle times. Before we jump into uncommon critical audit findings and the areas that you have to look into the vendor master, I would like to share with you common audit findings that auditors generally report in their audit report on the vendor master management. So, when auditors review vendor master management, they often focus on selecting samples of vendor master that have been created in the audit period. Then they compare it with the procedure requirements, like who is responsible for creating and reviewing and approving the vendor master, and then they compare whether in the actual transaction that happened or not, and then they issue the finding on missing approvals. Same goes for vendor master with missing fields, where generally auditors identify vendor master that lacks address or phone number and other commercial registration number and other fields. And the lastly, what I have seen, like the most auditors, this is their one of the most favorite findings that they always put in their audit report, which is about duplicate vendor masters. And that duplication of vendor master is identified based on the name, phone number, registration number. Well, these are good to highlight audit findings, but not critical or key to the business. These are issues only at the surface. And in my experience, many auditors stop at this point. They don't proceed and go deeper into the vendor master management, unfortunately, which leaves several high risk control gaps completely untested. So, I will walk you through the areas that I believe should be part of every auditor's playbook whenever they're auditing vendor master. To dive deep into the vendor master management process, you need to understand two things. Understand the vendor registration process at your organization, which means you need to understand who is responsible for creating and changing the vendor master in your organization, which department, and within those departments, who's responsible for processing these transactions, who is responsible for reviewing it, and ultimately who is responsible for approving it. And the second bit which you need to understand is the system being used in your organization. It could be SAP or Oracle or any other similar ERP system, but you need to understand what transaction is being used commonly by the procurement staff or the accounts payable staff to create, change, or block and unblock vendor masters. Uh, this is these two are the pillars of your understanding. Once you build that understanding, the next demonstration which I'm going to show you and the critical risky areas that you need to cover will become very easy for you to perform and understand and create a very meaningful and impactful findings into the vendor master area. So, by understanding the vendor registration process, I mean you need to understand in your organization how this process of vendor master creation and change is being governed. Is it something which is governed through delegation of authority? Uh, if you are a junior auditor, you may not know about delegation of authority, but if you are experienced auditor, you might know about what does it mean by having a delegation of authority. So let me explain in a simple manner. Delegation of authority is the hierarchy of approvals, which make sure there are segregation of duties, and the organization sets the right corporate governance expectations in the organization. And so each area, each process, and each department has its own delegation of authority, ideally in most of the matured organizations. If your organization does not have delegation or authority, it could be in an alternate way, maybe covered through a procedure. So you need to see how that the overall approval and the reviewer and the transaction processor, I mean the preparer of the information, how it is being captured, who's ultimately responsible, get that matrix, understand about it, and that will build your the understanding, like which areas you need to cover, which users who made the changes in the vendor master were actually authorized to do so or not. We will see the practical demonstration in the next slides, where I would show you like how you can get the information from SAP on the creator and the changer of the transactions on the vendor master level. So but you need to have a baseline, right? So that baseline would be your delegation authority, so you can highlight those non-compliances or lapses in the controls if someone who was not even included in the delegation authority is performing those transactions. So that's one of the area that you need to understand. And the second bit which you are required to understand is how this approval workflow has been configured in your ERP system, if it exists. If the approval workflow does not exist, this question is not applicable. But if it exists, you need to understand how it is flowing through in the system, and for both creation and changes, and how it is triggered, and how those changes and the creation transaction, I mean which user pops up in the created by field and the change by field. Those who have worked on SAP understands my point. If you have not worked on SAP, don't worry about it. You will see in the next slides what does it mean by created by or changed by. Because what happens in SAP, whenever someone makes a change, if it is done by individual user, which means a employee, then the user ID will populate in that field, like in the created by or in the change by. But if those data fields, if it is like done through approve workflow, those data fields may be containing a service account, like a system user, I mean, like WF batch or workflow batch, which means all the approval workflow that happened in the custom transaction, and when the system user has approved it, considered that transaction as approved, will be reflected in the data field in the created by or in the change by. So that's why you need to understand the approval workflow, how it is reflected in the system, and you have to go through one of the transactions where the vendor has been created. You have to sit with the procurement department, understand if it is implemented in ERP itself or not. Then the other area which you need to understand, which is very important, is that like whether your organization pays vendors through online bank transfer, which means your SCP might be connected with the relevant bank through which your organization is processing payments. If it is connected, then bank account information that is maintained on the vendor master level becomes a very critical field, because any unauthorized person making changes in the bank account field in the vendor master will result in a fraudulent transaction or erroneous transaction. So you need to see if that bank account information is filled in at the vendor master level. That's the first level of understanding you need to obtain from within your organization. The second is that if it is being filled, is it being used for online bank transfers or even for the manual bank transfers? Then it becomes a critical field. And then when we are going to cover the vendor master changes, I will show you in the next slide, you would be focusing on these critical fields to test them, who made those changes, why it was changed. Even if authorized person has made the change, you need to understand the rationale behind it, right? You need to get the supporting documents, whether the vendor has provided the bank letter from their bank that actually shows that they opened a new bank account maybe. So we need to have those justifications for those changes that has been made on the vendor master. So that's one area that you need to understand. The other is that like whether your your organization uses the payment terms maintained at the vendor master to process the payment runs. Why it is important? Because If your organization is referring, if they have created a payment run batch which picks the payment terms filled on the vendor master level, then it means if a vendor has 30 days payment period, then the payment will be like it will pick all the invoices that's due for the payment on its own. Then if some unauthorized user will change the payment terms, let's say from 30 days to 15 days, so it means like we are processing the vendor payments faster than what's our the policy says, or the one which we wanted to maintain at the vendor master level. So any changes at the vendor the payment terms in the vendor master actually is a sign of concern that all the auditors needs to consider, and it should be part of the testing. So but you need to understand like how what's the approach in your organization. If your organization is least bothered about the payment terms that is being maintained at the vendor master level, which I have seen in my experience, because some of the organizations just use the standard payment terms policy. Like for example, they don't even look at the payment terms maintained at the vendor master level. They would just be processing the payments for all the invoices that's past due 30 days, let's assume. So then it means this is not a critical field that you need to focus on. But if it is being used by your organization, and then it becomes a critical field if there is any changes. By the way, if your organization is not using that field, you need to recommend in your audit report that the organization needs to bifurcate the vendors based on the criticality of the services being used by the vendors or the material that being supplied by the vendors. So the company makes sure they are following the the list of payment terms based on the criticality of the vendors, and then they make sure that the payments are being rolled out based on those payment terms, because any early payment will affect the working capital management, right? But if any delays are there, is also as dangerous as early payments, because then it means you are affecting your relationship with the vendors by delaying your payments. So there should be a balance, right? And there should be something which there's the tone at the top, which means that this policy has been approved by the CEO or deputy CEO or by the executive director in your organization. So you need to see if this is something which is not even implemented, then you need to put it in your audit report as a recommendation that the organization has to follow the payment terms, and they need to design it and properly at the vendor master level. So based on these understanding, you can go into the next areas where we would be looking at what type of the risk that you need to cover. Personally, what I have seen in multiple audit departments across the organizations across the world, they don't consider these areas because they miss out due to lack of understanding about the processes that has been designed by the procurement department of the organization, or the SAP by default controls. Like for example, vendor master changes. So vendor master changes could be of many types, but the one which I would like you to focus on is the block unblock, which means any vendor which has been marked for block for posting or purchasing or deletion flag. These are different types of blocks. I will explain in later and in my other videos as well. But on a very brief level, posting block is a different type of block. So if a vendor has been blocked, is it a risk? Yes, it is, because it means there could be a genuine reason why that vendor has been marked blocked, but you need to seek reasons from the management, like why you have marked a vendor blocked during your audit period. Is there a justified reason behind it? Is it documented? Is it approved? If it is approved, it is documented, then it's fine. But if it is not, then you need to put it in your audit report as a control gap. You know why? Because sometimes some of the organizations, the procurement executive or the buyer, because they work at the lowest level, which means they are the ones who are processing the transactions, right? So most of the managers in the procurement, they may not even realize like a procurement executive or the buyer has blocked a vendor. By blocking the vendor, you know what happens, because the vendor will not be considered for a bidding round, because it will not even appear as an active vendor, right? So, and without the realization of the procurement manager that previously this vendor was actively participating in the bidding round and was maybe winning deals or being awarded, but this time it did not appear even in the RFQ, because that was marked for block by the procurement executive. So systematically it is just taken out of the competition. So we need to see how many vendors have been blocked during our audit period. That's one area. Then unblocking is also as dangerous as blocking the vendor, because unblocking it's even more dangerous than the blocking. You know why? Because if a procurement executive or unauthorized person or the business user has unblocked a vendor master which was previously blocked, so it means then it needs to be properly justified, because if the vendor was blocked previously because of maybe poor service or because of being blacklisted for certain type of the activities the vendor has been doing and the business they are dealing in, then it means any unblock actually puts the organization at risk. So we need to seek reasons from the management, like why this vendor has been unblocked during a audit period. So as I was saying, like there are different sort of blocks. Posting block, I will give you a brief description, is the block kind of block where uh, the organization cannot process the invoice because the vendor has been blocked for posting. But if it is blocked for posting, then it means the organization can still issue a PO or create a PO for that vendor. So that's why there's a purchasing block which restricts the procurement department from creating a PO if that vendor is marked for purchasing block. And there's one more block or flag, which is a deletion flag, which makes sure the vendor will not be uh, considered for creating the PO or for any activity in the system, because that has been flagged for deletion. So in short, it's a vendor which has been marked inactive. So these sort of blocks are there. You need to see which type of block has been implemented or has been revoked during your audit period. I will show you the practical demonstration, like how you get that information in the next few minutes. I have already created a practical demonstration where you can see detailed video, the T codes, the transactions, and the analysis that you have to perform to get that information as quickly as in 5 minutes. So you can highlight those issues and seek reasons from the management. And payment terms is another important area, as I previously explained. Bank account information, if any changes have been made there by an authorized person, or even if by the authorized person, it should be supported by the bank letter from the vendor, and should be these changes in the vendor master should be approved by the procurement management, like the procurement manager and the procurement director, depending on the financial threshold of the transaction being performed with the vendor, or depends on the procedure of the organization. And lastly, the vendor master change, which I want you to focus on, is the email address. Okay, most of you might be thinking this is not a critical field, right? But it is a critical field. You know why? Because if the organization is sending out the request for quotations, RFQs, through SAP and through your ERP system, then it means these vendors are being approached based on their email address that has been filled in the vendor master, right? If any wrong entry in the email address means our RFQ will be created on surface in the system, but email has not gone to the right email address, which means vendor is not even aware that he has been approached, and so therefore he would not be able to participate. For example, if there's an email address which was supposed to be nijaz at aa.com, it was filled as nijaz at aa.cm, missing or, which means this email will not go to this person, and he will not be able to uh, participate in the RFQ process or in the bidding process. And that's another systematic way of not excluding certain vendors. This could be a deliberate attempt. So you need to see the changes that have been made in the email address, why this email address has been changed from this to this by the procurement executive or any other person in the procurement of the business unit. So you need to seek reasons from the management why they have made those changes, and you also have to see the implications of those changes. You can see when the change was made, how many RFQs were sent out, how many were not participated by the vendor because of, and that could be one of the root cause why they did not participate. And the second area which we have to focus on is the vendor master duplicate invoice check. I know most of you are not even familiar with this concept. This is a system by default check in SAP that exists, which prevents the accounts payable from posting any invoice as a duplicate. So this is marked at the vendor master level. So in the vendor master, there's a field which named as duplicate invoice check. So it reads the previously posted invoices. If the document date, document reference number, which is the vendor reference number, and the amount and the vendor is matching, all the fields are matching, then it will pops up a warning message to the accounts payable team that this invoice has already been posted before. So this makes sure it actually helps in preventing duplicate invoice posting in the system. If this is not marked for the vendor masters in your vendor master list in your organization, then your organization is at risk of processing duplicate invoices, ultimately processing duplicate payments. One more area which you need to focus on, which most of the auditors neglect, is the one-time vendor master. Most of the auditors may not even familiar with this concept. One-time vendor master means this vendor. There are certain vendors which organization do not want to deal in future, or they just want to take the service only once. If they want to do it that way, they engage them through one-time vendor master process. So normally there are, whenever in SAP a vendor master is created, you need to mark them as, is it a one-time vendor master, or it is for not a one-time vendor master. So what it is, once it is marked one-time vendor master, then it means there could be pool of vendors within that vendor master. Like, I mean, all the ledger transaction would reflect multiple vendors. Amalgamation of vendors would be there on one-time vendor master account. Why it is a risky area? Because if a vendor which is a regular vendor has been routed through one-time vendor master, it actually creates a risk that you might not even have created a PO, or if you have created a PO but you have not taken the right onboarding process for the vendors you have routed through one-time vendor master, because these vendors are not scrutinized as the regular vendors. So that's why you need to seek reasons why these vendor master has been created, the transaction that has been processed. You need to use the analytics to fetch the numbers, how many transaction invoices has been posted under the one-time vendor master accounts. And lastly, inactive dormant vendor master. This is also a very critical area, because most of the auditors, they do not even highlight this aspect. Because why we need to identify and highlight inactive vendor master is because if there's a huge number of inactive vendor master, then it means the procurement department is consistently approaching them for seeking the quotation, right? So there's a possibility that these vendors are already out of business, or they're no longer interested in dealing with the quotation. That's why they're not participating in the quotation rounds. So you need to make sure that the procurement department cleans their vendor master list. So it means they will not just show high number of RFQs being sent out, because if you see the reality, only few vendors are participating on the RFQs, because most of the quotations which are being sent out, the request for quotations, this is to those inactive vendors which are not even responding. So the procurement, once they will close these inactive vendors which you will be highlighting, it means only the relevant vendors with which the organization is dealing on actively basis, and the one which are actually participating in the bidding rounds would be in the vendor master. That will force a behavior in the procurement department that they would be going out to the market, will try to find a better vendors, more vendors, so that they can meet the minimum three quotation criteria if it exists in your organization. So that's why this is very important area. I will show you the demonstration in the upcoming videos, like how you can get this information, how you can analyze it, because it requires multiple data fields and it's a subjective criteria that needs to be applied to identify the inactive vendor master. So now let's explore each of these areas in details with practical demonstration. So now let's explore on the vendor master changes. So you need to access this T code S underscore ALR 87012089. So once you run this report, you can fill in the change on date, which could be audit period or the last year, depends on your need. Once you put in the date, you have to make sure all the fields are selected. Once the fields are selected, you have to click on this icon. It generates the report and gives you the output in this format. Now you can see the field names, which shows what type of changes have been made or has been created or deleted. So you can see the new value, old value, and you can export in Excel. So you have to click list, export spreadsheet. You can name it like vendor master changes 01 January 2025 to 31st of March 2026. And once you click on the export to, and you have selected your folder, so it will export. This message will pop up. You need to click on allow, and then once it's exported, it looks like in this format in Excel, which shows the date, time, supplier code, user ID, field name, company code, purchasing organization, new value, alt value. Once you apply the filter, you can see the type of changes in the field name. It starts from account group. There are multiple changes: deletion flag, house number, encode terms, payment terms, telephone, title. So all sort of changes are reflected in the field name. So you can filter based on your understanding about the process, as I mentioned about the process in your organization, which fields are critical as per your understanding about the organization. For example, bank details. So you can select those critical fields. I would be selecting bank details, deletion flag, and payment terms. Yes, so once I selected this, it will show me all these changes. I can see the new value, the old value. So it will show me who has made those changes and what type of changes are reflected in the log. So I can see that there is one bank detail that has been deleted. I will open the filter and I can see the user that has made the changes, the supplier for which these changes have been made. I can see the date, which is like covering 2026. I will open the filter completely and you can see that this contains the complete log. Now, if I would like to add more information, because user ID is there but not the username, so I need the username, right? And also supplier ID is there but not the supplier name, so I need the supplier name. So these two fields will be added with supplementary information that I will be fetching from two different transactions. So stick around just to understand like how I would be getting those information. So there's one T code which is S underscore BCE 68001400, which will show you the list of users that exist in your organization. So you can run this report blank, that will give you the complete list, but for us we need only for these users that have made changes in the vendor master during our audit period. So I will paste the values, I will remove the duplicates. So after removing duplicates, 103 unique values are there. I will paste this the user IDs. I will paste here, but make sure don't use Control V. You have to select this icon. Once you press this icon, it will take all the values 103. Once done, click on this icon. It will give you the user master, the long name, and in some organizations you would see there are additional columns that you can add, like the department cost center. I will show you now. So if you press this icon, it gives you more options that you can put it in the output. In my organization there's no department, no cost center has been filled, but in your organization maybe this information is being filled. Now for the supplier, I will do the same thing. I will take these total number of vendors. I will remove the duplicate, which show me 6 vendors. So I will pick these 6 vendors. I will go to a transaction which is MKVZ, which actually shows the complete vendor master. So I will just type in MKVZ. I can run this report, which just give me the complete vendor master, but that's not my requirement. So I will click here. I will put the numbers which I already selected. I will press run. So it will give me the list of the suppliers. I mean the name of the suppliers. But here's the catch: the supplier code is not appearing here. So we need to add a column. So I will go to the layout. I will be selecting the supplier. I will put it in the displayed columns. Now it's there at the bottom. I will put it in the first column and then press once. Now I have the supplier code next to the supplier name because I have to use the VLOOKUP. That's why this information was important. So I would just bring it in the Excel format and we'll use the VLOOKUP and add these details like supplier name and username. So this log will give me the complete picture on the vendor master changes that have happened during my audit period. Now jumping into the second area, which is vendor master duplicate invoice check. Most of you may not know about what is duplicate invoice check. So I will just show you how it's reflected in the SAP. For that you have to we will just pick one sample case. So you have to get into FK03, which is actually a vendor master display report. I will just select one vendor, which is PAMI LLC. I will just click enter. It will give take me to the window where I can see the more details about the vendor. You need to click on the company code. Once you click, you need to click on vendor payment transactions tab, and there you can see check double invoice. Here you can see this is unchecked, which means this is not enabled for this vendor master. And if you go to the technical information, you can see the SAP explained that this flag is for checking for double invoices or credit memos. So what SAP does, it will make sure the incoming invoices that are being entered in the system, if it has already been entered for the same date, like at the document date, then it will flag that transaction to the poster, which means the accounts payable accountant, that this invoice might already been posted before, so that it will prevent them from posting a duplicate invoice. So you can see the further information down there. It mentions that the duplicate invoices are done by the system compares the following specified characteristics, which is vendor, currency, company code, gross invoice amount, reference document number, and the invoice document date. What does it mean by reference document number? This is actually a document number that's printed on the vendor's document, and not the document number that has been generated by the system in our ERP. It's the reference document number, which is the number which is mentioned on the vendor invoice, and the vendor document date, which means the vendor invoice document date. So once all these fields are matching, then it means the invoice which was previously posted, it's just a duplicate of it, so it will flag those transactions. But here's a catch. As per my experience, because since I worked in multiple organizations, as I mentioned before, and I have seen some of the organizations, they do not follow the practice of filling the reference document number. So you need to see how your organization does it. If they're filling the right data fields, then once this field is enabled, then it prevents them from posting a duplicate invoice. So I hope you understand the duplicate invoice check that's by default provided by SAP, and why it is important to be checked or marked by the procurement department. Now we will jump into the video where we can see the demonstration, like how you can fetch this information from SAP directly, being the auditor or business analyst or the procurement person. So you need to use the table, because in the standard SAP you may not find this information, because there's not a transaction that exists in SAP that shows the duplicate vendor indicator for the list of vendors. Because if you want to see it, that field, you need to access it for individual vendor masters, which is a very tedious and time consuming task. So you can just go into SE16, which is the table browser which shows all the tables. So once you click SE16, press enter, there you can enter the table name. So for vendor master display, the table name is LFB1. So you will just type in LFB1, but once you click enter, it will take you to this window where it shows the selection parameters. You can see the supplier code field, you can see company code field, and check duplicate invoice field. So you have a choice that you can just run the report by selecting this field, but before that I just go back to the previous window. I will just show you one thing. So in this case, if you want to select the selection parameters, like the parameters on which you are running the report, you can press F8. It will pop up this window. So in this window you have a choice, like you can select multiple fields for your selection parameter. For my purpose, since I want to make sure that in the selection parameter there should be a duplicate invoice indicator field, so the field name is REDRF. So you need to make sure this is selected. So you will double click, you will just check this field so that it make sure that this field is selected. You will just press this tick, it will take you to this window. and you can see that this field is now available, right? So in this field, you have two options. So if you click on the icon next to it, it will show you what options you have. So you can see if you want to select those which has been enabled for double invoice indicator, you have to select yes, which means X mark. And if you don't want to see the vendor which have been marked for double invoice indicator, then you have to keep it blank, which system will consider it as no. So in this case, we want to see the vendor which has been enabled for this indicator. So X mark is there. Make sure you keep your width 999, which means like the complete list of the transactions and the columns, and then and also the maximum number of it. So you need to keep it as 9999. So once you have selected this fields, just press this icon. It will give you the report where it shows like 20 vendor masters that has this indicator enabled, which is seems like good practice. It means like they have enabled it for 20 vendor masters, but you need to verify whether they have enabled it for all the vendors. So you have to keep this field blank, which will give you the control gap, like for which vendors they have not marked for deletion. So what I did, I went to the area where I would be selecting exclude single values, because that makes sure that I would be putting X there, which means it will exclude the X values. So it will give me all the other cases other than X. So I will just clicking on side. You can see that once I selected this field, once I click this icon, so it shows this is not equal to X. So once I click run, you can see the output which shows there are 1267 vendor masters for which this double invoice indicator has not been marked, which is actually a control gap that needs to be highlighted by all the auditors while auditing the vendor master management or the procurement area in general. Now we will jump into our next area, which is about one-time vendor master. So one-time vendor master, you need to use the same T code SE16 LFA1. You can go there, you have to type LFA1 table, and make sure you select F8, or you can select this from generate program, press enter. It will pop up the same window as I previously showed. So you can here type in the created on, so it will show you the date field. So you can select it as a selection parameter, created by, because we need these fields as a selection parameter. We also need the one time vendor account. So this is the field which we need to select. Once we marked it, we will click this icon, and then we can go to this window. So it's a very similar window like the one which I showed you before. So once you selected this, so it will take you to the same selection parameters. So you can just type in the created on date, which I would be filling in based on my audit period, but I'm keeping it like until the end of the year, which means it will be as of date. And then it will give me similar options, like if X is marked, then it means I'm selecting yes. So I want to see all the vendor masters which are created for as one time. So I will just make sure like all the fields are selected as I previously mentioned, like 999. Once I click the execution mark, it will take me to the output where I can see there are 11 vendor masters that has been created during my audit period, which were actually one-time vendor masters. So we need to seek the reasons from the management, like why they created so many one-time vendor masters, and is it documented, is it approved, is it justified. So we need to seek those reasons from the management. So the one-time vendor master, once you have this list, you can just move forward with our analysis. So you need to extract this information in Excel. So there are two options. Either you can select, you can click right click here, you can have the option spreadsheet, or you would just click table entry, list, export, and spreadsheet. So either option is fine. So you just have to type in the name of the file, which is one time vendor master created 01 January 2025 to 31st December 2026. So once you hit the export to key. You can just select the folder where you want it to be. So I will select the desktop. Once selected, I will hit save and allow, then allow again. So this will export it into Excel format. So here you can see this is clean data, structured data, and you have all the available columns for the vendor master. And I'm just will trace the field which shows one-time vendor master marked as X. Yes, so you can see that this has been marked X, which means these are all one-time vendor masters that has been created during your audit period. So now we need to select these vendor master, and we need to uh, get more details on the transaction, like whether these vendors we posted any transaction. So we select FBL uh, 1N, which makes sure we can see the vendor payments or invoices or credit memo, any other transaction posted for these vendor accounts. So I will just paste here. So I click the same icon, copy from the clipboard, click OK, and then I have to select all items, which means all items, like open items or clear items. It will show me all the items. So I will select the period for which I would looking for the information, and then I make sure that you select special GL transactions. Click this icon, so it will give you the transaction details. So here we can see that there's only one transaction has been posted. I need to select all the columns, but there's one limitation. So if you select all, the SAP will not allow, because this is more than 1020 columns. So you need to select individually the relevant columns. So I will be selecting some of these columns which I believe are important and that I require in my output report. So I would be selecting all these fields, uh, posting date, company code, and then the payment, fiscal year, and I would, so there's one field, yeah, payment date. So so if I have to transfer it and the reference keys, I will just be selecting. Then once I selected all these relevant fields, I have to click this icon on the left side. You can see that on your left there are multiple options. So I would be selecting this field, so it will just bring it to the displayed column fields. I will click copy, so it will show all the relevant columns. Now I can export in Excel format by selecting list, export spreadsheet in the same manner which we did before. So that's how we can get the information about the invoices and the payment documents that has been posted on these one-time vendor accounts. Before we close on one-time vendor master, because there could be a chance that maybe these vendor master may not have the activity on the financial side, but there's some POs that has been created or the contract that has been created. For that purpose, you need to select me80fn. So you will I would be pasting the vendor codes here. So once the vendor codes are here, I have to select the purchasing document category. So once I click this icon, it shows me what type of purchasing documents exist. So these are the standard list of purchasing documents. So you can see that there's purchase order, there's contract, there's a scheduling agreement, there's quotation, central contract. So for my purpose, I would be selecting purchase order. So once done, I will click run. So it will show me all the purchase order that has been created for the one-time vendors. So there's one PO. So once I double click on this, it will take me to the ME23 view where I can see the PO details. But this PO has been held, which means it has not been released. So you can see the description on top, held, and in the status it will show you ordered but not delivered yet. And you can also see the message, which means like this PO still contains faulty items, which means it has not been released yet. So all these details you can get it from ME80fn, and this will just supplement your analysis on the one-time vendor master. So you would be questioning on the design level, like why these vendor master has been created, whether it was approved or not, and the transaction that has been posted in those vendor masters relating to which vendor. The description you can see from FBL1, and if there's no financial transaction, you can head to ME80fn, which will show you the contracts if it exists, or the PO that if it exists for these one-time vendor accounts. So this will add your more details to your analysis. Before we wrap up, I would like to mention one more important area. that deserves every auditor's attention. That is about inactive vendor master records. Many organizations accumulate vendor records that have not been used for months or even years. If these inactive vendors are not periodically reviewed and made deactivated, they can become a source of control weaknesses and creating a potential for fraudulent activity. Let me give you one example how the fraud can happen in this area. Procurement executives or buyers, they have a target and organizations that they have to bring in vendors, and they have to reach out multiple vendors before they conclude on a deal, right? So as part of the bidding round, they send out a request for quotation to multiple vendors and getting the quotation and then doing the comparative analysis, right? So what happens, these procurement executives and buyers sometimes they send out the request for quotation to inactive vendors that either have already closed their businesses or they're no longer interested in dealing with your organization, so they don't respond back. But on document and apparently it shows as if like the procurement executive or buyer has reached out minimum 3 vendors or 5 vendors, but in reality it could be just 1 or 2 vendors because other rest of the vendors did not even participate. Why it happened? Because those vendor master were sitting in your vendor master list. That's why this area is very important, and the periodic activity will make sure inactive vendors which have not responded on any of the quotation in the last 2 years or 1 year, depends on your organization's procedure, or you can adopt a general best practice that's common in the industry. So if the vendor has not submitted a quotation in the last 2 years and does not have an outstanding invoice for payment with you, you can recommend the procurement department to deactivate such vendor records, and any reactivation of those vendor records require approval from based on the delegation authority of the department. So, and this is very important area. But since we have covered multiple topics in today's session, so we will be covering this in detail in the next session, where I will show you the tables and how you can fetch that relevant information, how you have to use your subjective criteria, and once you add all the fields, once you refine your data, transform your data, and comes up with a meaningful result, how it can help the organization in uh, preventing potential fraudulent activity. So, thank you everyone, and that brings us to the end of today's session. I hope this course has given you a deeper understanding of vendor master management, and more importantly, how to audit beyond the traditional checklist. As we have seen, vendor master, that is the foundation of every procurement and payment transaction. So knowing about the process and how it has been mapped in the system in ERP actually helps the organization in a much bigger way. I encourage you to apply these techniques as I presented in your on audit engagements. Start by understanding your organization's vendor registration process, and learn how your ERP system manages vendor master data, and use data analytics to identify control gaps that might otherwise go unnoticed. If you found this session valuable, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing with your colleagues, because I will be posting more of such content in the next upcoming days. Thank you. Looking forward to seeing you in the next session.